Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. So today is typically my guest episode day on Wednesdays, but I'm going to post another episode where I was a guest on somebody else's podcast, but this one is a little bit different. I was actually invited to be a guest speaker in Kathy's group coaching call, and she wanted me to come on to talk about body recomp, what can happen at maintenance, muscle in a deficit, how to think about progress beyond the scale, and then even things like hydration, meal timing. We dove into that, sleep, stress, and then also talked about creatine, dove deep into that as well too. So it was a fun casual conversation, but I feel like it's super actionable. There were some questions in there as well too. So I feel like there's a lot in this episode that you can take away from there. Now, from what I remember, she forgot to hit record right off the bat. So I think we missed a little bit of the beginning of it, the introduction. And then also I talk about what I think body recomp is. So you did miss that part of it. However, you're still going to get a ton out of this episode, but just so you know that you might, if it just sounds like it randomly started, that's why. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. And as always, if you have any questions, you can always reach out on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. And then also, if you really want to learn more about a body recomp, I have my free body recomp checklist. So 10 things you need to do. I also dive into what a body recomp is, what it's not, common misconceptions, 2 types of body recomp. So make sure you go check that out. And the link to that is in the show notes. Enjoy this episode.
It's important to know that you don't have to be in a deficit to change your body composition. And I always say this. So it's not necessarily fair to say that we're going to lose fat and build muscle at the same time, even though that is what we're doing.
Obviously, if we want to take body fat off of our body, we do need to be in some sort of deficit. But where I think it can maybe get a little confusing is depending on where you're coming from. If you're somebody who came in and you haven't really weight trained before, maybe your protein's been super low, or you just haven't really trained in a way that's going to be geared towards building muscle, or maybe no structure, you're going to have this large kind of runway that's going to help you build muscle. You just weight train, you improve that's going to put you in a good position to build muscle. But in order to actually lose body fat, we do need to be in a energy deficit. But again, where that can get cloudy is if you don't have a lot of muscle and you start really working towards that. And again, I always tell people it's never going to be this one-to-one thing where in a perfect world, yes, it would be, but it's never going to be this one-to-one. Your weight's the same. You probably never lost 5 pounds of fat and gained 5 pounds of muscle at one time. That would be awesome if that's the case, but very rarely is that the case. Again, in some people that can definitely happen, but that's less likely. So you do need to be in a deficit to lose body fat, but there's some good things that can happen when you're at, say, your maintenance calories. And again, like I said, depending on where you come in, some of that weight loss or fat loss may be masked by the fact that you are adding some muscle. So I think that's where that can sometimes get confusing. But what I try to make the point of is just because you're at maintenance calories, a lot of people think that nothing's happening there. And there can be some positive things that happen. Now, and this may be what you were alluding to, was that at maintenance, you could drop your body fat percentage, right? That's what we could do. You're not going to actively drop body fat, but hear me out on this. If you add some muscle being at maintenance, right, you're not going to lose body fat there, but you can put yourself in a great position to build muscle. You're going to be the same body weight, but you'll have more muscle, right, at that point. And so that's how we can decrease that body fat percentage. Does that kind of make sense, the thought around that?
You can yourselves and ask any questions. You can pop it into chat if you want more clarity on what Jeff is saying. I don't see anybody actively trying to type.
I guess I'll take this. So let's say, so your weight's trending down, right? We know that you're in some sort of deficit at that point. And this is the only way that we can take body fat off the body. And you can build some muscle here, as we talked about, really coming into it. It depends on what you're doing beforehand. But in saying that, you're never going to maximize muscle growth in a deficit. You can still build some. I think people think of it either or, as you can build muscle or you absolutely can't. But it's on a sliding scale of what you can do. We're never going to maximize it. But I feel like a lot less people want to maximize muscle growth than we make it out to be. So I think for a while, we have this good opportunity to add some muscle in a deficit. And so we need to take that in consideration. But ultimately, what I try to make the point of is what we're actively doing is going to be the most important thing. So our inputs are going to be the biggest thing in that situation. But the quicker we lose weight, aka the larger the deficit is, the less likely muscle growth is going to happen in that process. So the quicker we're losing weight, it's going to be less and less likely that we add muscle. But again, keep this in mind. This is also dependent on where you're at when you come in. So the less muscle you have coming in, the more likely that's going to happen. But for anybody, as we continue to increase how quickly we lose weight, that's going to be less likely that it happens. But you take someone who comes in and they're already pretty lean, they have a decent amount of muscle. For them, it's all about maintaining as much muscle as possible. But if somebody comes in, they have a decent amount of muscle, maybe not very much, pretty good amount of body fat to lose, they have this kind of larger runway to add some muscle and lose body fat at the same time. With the caveat, that process is the muscle building process will never be maximized at that point, but you can still see good progress. That's how that looks. I don't know if Kathy, if you have any follow-ups to that or anything you want me to clarify there.
Typically what happens with my demographic, the ladies in their 40s, 50s, is we're in a declining state of muscle because we're not actively building it, right? And so we're seeing this shift in body fat. So a higher body fat percentage because we have a lower muscle mass. And then we do something like Optavia. And you're going to be in a deficit, but then you lose muscle and fat at the same time from doing that approach. What happens is when you gain the weight back, when you go back to doing what you were doing before, then we just see we have less muscle and then we just have more fat on the body. I know that went a little bit off topic. Could you explain like why? I assume that you don't, when somebody comes in, you don't just put somebody in a deficit right away. You
right.
start a little bit of a maintenance phase. So what does that look like in your process?
Yeah. So when most people come in, again, this is going to depend on where they're at, right? If again, when we assess their body composition, if it's like, hey, they're already pretty lean, then okay, that may change things up. But most people that come in, it's like they have a little bit of body fat they want to lose, and they probably need to add a little bit of muscle. So in that process, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get them to eat enough, right? Let's increase protein. Let's see where that's at. And we just want to get them to eat enough. And ideally, we would be close to maintenance. But sometimes you'll see it. People start increasing protein. They make better food choices. They're like more active outside of the gym. They just start making better choices because they're making better choices overall. And they just naturally get into you start to see things trend down because they're making better choices. So that's always a good thing. But if someone's, hey, I really want to find where my maintenance calories are at, then we would try to focus on that and making sure. But most people are never upset that they're seeing their scale weight trend down a little bit. Obviously, we don't want to focus only on the scale weight, right? Really, with the scale weight, what we're looking at is that's just telling us the energy balance we're in. And that's just going to tell us, hey, if we're seeing our weight trend down, our body is going to break down our energy storage on our body, whether that be fat mass or muscle mass. And what we're trying to do in that process is make sure that is body fat that it's coming from, because that's what's really going to improve your look. You already talked about what can happen if you lose fat. But again, this is where coming back to the inputs that are super important. If you weight train, which I know you have your people weight train, I know you focus on protein, sleep, managing your overall like stress load on your body, hydration, meal timing, like these are all things that we can start to do to really ensure that we're not going to, that the body's going to take that energy from body fat versus muscle. So that's really why I use this scale and what that can tell us in that process. And so when we're doing that, if I get somebody to focus on the habits and they see their scale weight come down, again, that's going to be a win because I think that you're going to see nice kind of change there with that. But as I said initially, if their weight stays about the same and we get them to start weight training in a way that's geared towards adding muscle strength, we're increasing protein, there's going to be some positive adaptations that happen to the body. And you're going to notice that. It's just probably going to be a little bit slower, right? That's going to be the big thing, is that's going to be a little bit slower to see because muscle growth is a slow process. It's not quick. Obviously, the less muscle you have, the newer you are, like that's going to speed it up. It's going to be a lot quicker of a process than people call that the newbie gains. But I always tell people when you're at maintenance, it's probably going to be a little bit slower to see progress. But there's still positive things that are happening that are going to help you. Obviously now, like you're going to see some improvement, it's just going to be slower, but down the line, it's going to be super helpful, right? If we can, worst case scenario, say you keep your weight the same and you're working on all these habits that are going to maintain or build muscle, you're just going to put your body in a better position from a metabolic health standpoint, overall health standpoint, to where now when you decide to apply a deficit of, okay, let's go and try and lose weight now, it should be a much easier process and a more effective process. So that's the thought behind that and what you can see happen at maintenance. Because I just see a lot of people think, hey, I'm at maintenance, I'm not losing weight, progress isn't happening. But I feel like the progress, that's a little bit more under the hood and just a little bit slower there. And you're building those habits to help you see that progress down the line.
I think everybody on here can relate with what are we doing here in maintenance? It's a necessary part to get that body primed, even though we're not seeing, like when we look at progress, we wouldn't measure it on the scale, right? Because that's not what we're looking at. If anything, we want that thing to be the same. That means we're in maintenance with a fluctuation of 1 to 2 pounds. And so that's actually a win. I know you guys are like, what the hell? But I'm like, yes, this is perfect, right? We're getting hunger cues back. We have energy, we're sleeping better, digestion is better, we're starting to put that muscle on, and then that just sets you up for an effective fat loss phase. So I know everybody here has experienced that process. Jen's asking, how do we know where we're at? How much muscle is a good amount, and how do we determine that? I don't know if we can actually answer that.
No, that's a good question. Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. And here's the thing. It's just really hard to know an exact number. The thing with muscle is you could get like a DEXA, you could get like in body scan, but those are going to be off a little bit, right? There's a lot of measurement error with that, and it's really dependent on what you're doing beforehand. So it's very sensitive to what you ate the day before, your hydration, what time of day you're doing it. Did you just exercise? So that can be a decent idea of like where you're at. But otherwise, there's really no good way to that we're going to have access to really know how much muscle you have. Again, the DEXA can give us an idea. But otherwise, my thought on this is, hey, wherever you're at, that's your starting point. And now what we're going to focus on is what are the things that are going to put you in the best position to continue to build off that, right? Because with building muscle too, not only is it a slow process, but it is also very genetic as well too. They respond very well to weight training and they'll build a ton of muscle. And then there's people that's just a little bit slower. And so that's how I go about, hey, are we building muscle? Do we have enough? And then that's unfortunately the best answer I can give you. There's no, this would be the number to aim for or the test to do to look at that. It's really just your baseline and then putting you in the best position to continue to add from there. And just over time, are you seeing an improvement in your like body composition, how you look as well too? I think that's going to be your best kind of proxy there. Was that kind of what you were asking there with that, Jen? Was like a DEXA or something like that?
Or I feel like the process is really slow for me right now. And so I'm trying to determine if I'm still doing all the right things, which I'm sure I am. But yeah, it just seems like I build muscle quicker than it can burn fat, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to tell. That's why I was just wondering, how do you know when you're in that fat burning state? If you're not seeing too many changes or seeing the scale move, kind of.
I think like body fat percentage, like getting that and taking the measurements and seeing if that's shifting, and then having an increase in lean muscle mass and a decrease in body fat. So that's the lean mass to muscle ratio, lean mass fat ratio. No, that's not it. LBM, lean body, yeah. And muscle, building muscle, like realistically, Jeff, if somebody is lifting as heavy as they safely can, 3 to 4 days a week, and they're in a super huge deficit, say they're in like a 250, maybe 300 calorie deficit, how much muscle about would you gain a month?
A month. Again, this is going to be, I hate to take a cop out of this. It just depends, but it depends on what you're doing, what your current body composition is, right? How much muscle you have now. I would say best case scenario per month, a newbie could probably do 1 to 2-ish pounds, probably on the higher end per month of adding muscle. Okay. But here's the thing, adding 1 to 2 pounds of muscle over a couple months or whatever, that's going to make a huge difference in your body composition. I think people think that it needs to be this like 10-pound difference, and it really doesn't. Again, I think where you're really going to see biggest changes, again, you're setting yourself up here to add muscle now, you're doing the habits, but then where you're really going to see that super quick change is going to be when you do fat loss. But that's not going to be the right, I know Kathy, you're big on this, it's not always going to be the right way to go about it, right? Some people just aren't in a good spot to drop body fat probably when they come into you, right? Like they need to get set up for that. So it's like, you just have to talk to the client and just tell them, hey, we got to be patient with this. And you are doing some things that are going to help you out down the line when, hey, now you're in a better spot to potentially drop some body fat and go into a deficit there. Does that answer your question? Did I answer that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so for sure, like sending the stimulus and having the nutrients and the protein to build that muscle is going to be key to any kind of building this muscle. Like that's definitely going to be like the hierarchy, right? It would be you tell me, in my mind, it's sending the stimulus, right, of lifting appropriately heavy for your body to then create that muscle, the building the muscle, and then feeding that muscle as well with the proper nutrients, protein, and not being in a steep deficit.
No matter what, because a lot of people think, hey, if I increase protein, is that going to help me build muscle? And it's like, no, you need to send that signal to your body. Hey, you like need to add more muscle, right? We're lifting weights and now we have to build more muscle in order to keep doing that, right? That's a kind of concept of progressive overload. So that sends that signal, but really to complete that process, you need enough protein. So that's going to be the training stimulus is number one. And then you need protein. And then, yes, the energy balance, like your energy balance being, hey, you're in a deficit. Is your weight trending down? Is your weight staying the same? Is it going up? That's also going to help with that process. As I talked about, if your weight is trending down, you're still going to build muscle, but it's not going to be maximized. When you're at maintenance, you're going to put yourself in a great spot to add more muscle at that point, right? And then also the things that I think people overlook are going to be like, what's your sleep quality like? Sleep quality is going to be important. Yes, 6 to 8 hours, but also is it quality sleep? Overall, like stress load on the body, stress management, like those things are going to be important as well too. And then, like I said earlier, hydration I think is a big one that's often overlooked as well too. And then meal timing, the concept of meal timing, right? I think with protein, yes, it's how much protein you have overall, but then it's also like around your workout, like making sure you're not going too long. I don't think you necessarily need to be like, hey, I got to grab my protein shake a minute after I get done working out. But you probably don't want to go more than an hour or two after your workout without getting any sort of protein in, especially if you didn't really get anything in beforehand there. So I also think meal timing is kind of another one. But with hydration, to go back on that, this is super interesting. So even like a 1 to 2% water loss in terms of in terms of that, like even like really minor dehydration can impact your training performance and just like your perception of fatigue and pains. People are probably semi-dehydrated. It's super easy to forget to drink fluid, maybe have a lot of coffee, whatever it may be. And even a little bit can impact your training performance, which in turn is going to impact how much muscle you can build over time. In the short term, it may not be that big of a deal, right? But we got to think of the compounding effect of you doing that day in and day out. So again, I think hydration is a big one. And then also, again, it impacts your perception of fatigue and pain. So you start to tire out quicker than what you actually think. And so again, just something there that, again, one of these kind of things that like people will overly focus on, hey, am I gaining weight? Am I maintaining weight? Am I losing weight? But then we lose sight of like the deeper things underneath the layer a little bit more of like hydration that can really make a big impact no matter if you're in a surplus at maintaining your weight or decreasing your weight.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Like I've never heard it put like that as far as the fatigue aspect and that perception of fatigue as well. So drink that, lady. I know a lot of times we're like low-key dehydrated. And again, like you said, compounding effects.
I'm probably same thing. I'd like to drink a lot of coffee during the day. And next thing I know, oh crap, I haven't had water for 2 hours. All right, I need to get back on it. Coffee's not necessarily going to dehydrate you, but if you also aren't hydrating at all with like fluid, like that's where it can start to add up a little bit. So
yeah. I'm a huge advocate of everything. So Lisa's asking, if you're in a deficit, how do you keep yourself motivated? Positive self-talk with strength training if you are not gaining muscle. I think you can still gain muscle in a deficit. It's just going to not be as fast as if you were not in a deficit. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the first thing, right? We're gonna reframe that because I do think a lot of people go into it thinking, hey, I'm in a deficit, I'm not going to build any muscle. And that's hopefully by then that's what you guys will realize here. You can still build muscle in a deficit, right? With your weight trending down. So I think that's the first thing is just reframing your mind around that of, hey, I still am going to build some muscle here. Because I always tell people, if you go into the thought of, oh, hey, I'm just going to lose muscle during weight loss or I'm not going to gain any, I feel like that in turn, now you go into your training with that thought process. And I feel like you don't push yourself as hard as you could in your training. Again, to talk about what we just talked about with the kind of compounding effect, it's okay, one session, we all know not every time you go into the gym, you're going to crush it. You're going to have some bad sessions. You're going to have some okay ones. You're going to have some good ones. But if we go into it where we have that mindset, I feel like you're going to have more bad ones. And that's going to compound over time. So yes, I think the first thing is realizing that, hey, you need to, or reframing it around like you still can build muscle. And again, if we have that thought process of, we're not going to, then that's just going to bleed into everything you do in that session. And then also just, this is where, again, I think if you can start to focus on maybe these smaller things like hydration, meal timing around your workout, these are things that now you're like, okay, hey, I can still have good training sessions and that will help you there. But I think the big thing is the reframing of it, because I think that's going to help you stay motivated to want to go and push it because you have that, you know that now, hey, if my inputs are there, I can still build muscle as I'm dropping weight.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes being in a deficit, like it can be mental. I just don't have the calories. I can't push through. And I try, strength is your strength. You still have the strength. We might not have like as much energy as we're used to having, but there are definitely some things that you can do again around meal timing to really feed that workout for that specifically if you are in a deficit.
Meal timing and then sleep too, right? That's a lot. Like anytime somebody's in a deficit and they're like, hey, I'm hungry or I'm tired, they usually want to blame it on the deficit. And that could be it. Again, you're not bringing in as much food. That could be it. But I also feel like we have to look at the other things of, okay, hey, how are you sleeping? Are you hydrated? We want to ask those things and see, because usually those end up being the issues. And if we can work on that, it's going to help you manage that deficit better. And again, if we can go into our training now, we can train better. And now we're focused on, hey, I'm still going to build muscle when I'm in a deficit. That's going to help your look overall, right? Because as you drop body fat, now you're for sure going to at least be maintaining muscle. Now you could potentially even be building some if we set things up the right way, you still push yourself and everything like that. And that's going to be where you can see this simultaneous fat loss and muscle gain. And to bring this full circle, this is where I feel like people think they don't have as much runway as they do to do both at the same time. And again, this is where why I think the inputs are super important. I'll probably hit on that again as well.
Thank you.
So while we're on the subject of sleep, first of all, sleep. can be an elusive son of a bitch, right? And then also sleep quality. So what are some things that you tell your clients to help improve that sleep?
Yeah. So for me, sleep was something that I always struggled with. And I just thought I was like, hey, this is just how I am, right? Oh, I'm just not a good sleeper. It is what it is. But as I've just learned more about sleep, and to me, the big thing we'll talk about is like your circadian rhythm. There's a lot of like low hanging fruit things that I think a lot of people overlook when it comes to sleep. So when I'm thinking of sleep, I'm looking at your entire day. We're not just looking at, hey, it's 9:30, you're going to sleep. What does that look like? There are things you can do to help improve your sleep. Obviously, keep your room dark as possible, cool. Those are all things that can help, but that's just an acute thing. We need to zoom out and look at your entire day, because if we can master, that's going to help put you in a better position to get good quality sleep. And that's ultimately what we're trying to go for here. So first, we're looking at, let's try and get outside as early as we can, get some sunlight. If possible, you can also get some bright light. So I don't know, Kathy, if you know of any like light therapy.
Luminet glasses, I have them.
Yeah, so any sort of light therapy can work too, but if you can get outside, that's probably going to be better, because as you guys know, anytime you go outside, you just feel better. So we're trying to get out as early as we can within reason, right? Like obviously in the winter, and this is comes in the big, like when you think on everything, like why people maybe have like seasonal depression, is the fact that we don't really get outside as much and the sunlight is just not as strong, right? But we want to try to get outside as early as we can, and then we want to try to get a decent amount of sunlight throughout the day, right? Like within reason. You don't want to just never get sunlight and then go out for 2 hours, right? You got to obviously pay attention to your skin there. But so we want to try to get sunlight, obviously exercise, not throughout the day, but just at some point in the day, try to stay as active as you can. Then next thing we want to look at is like stimulants. So caffeine, how late are you taking caffeine? Ideally, we would be cutting that off between 12 and 2. The earlier, the better. But again, it's all within reason. Sometimes I understand, hey, it's 2 o'clock, I need a little bit of caffeine. But we just want to try to limit as much caffeine as we can from bed. A lot of people are like, I take caffeine or I have coffee and I go to sleep fine. It's like, yeah, you can maybe go to sleep fine, but it is going to impact your sleep quality, right? So that's going to be like, hey, we're sleeping for 8 hours and I still feel groggy or whatever that may be. So then there's that. But then we also want to look at sleep regularity. So sleep regularity being like, we want to make sure that we're not shifting when we fall asleep too much and when we wake up too much, right? So a lot of times on the weekends, people will go to sleep a lot later, then they'll wake up a lot later. We want to try to avoid that. Now, you don't necessarily have to go to sleep at the exact same time every night. I try to give myself like an hour buffer, plus or minus, on the weekends to stay fairly consistent there. But hey, sometimes you're just going to sleep in a little bit later. It just happens. The key thing being, you just want to make sure that it's not too far and regular, right? I think that's the big thing. So staying consistent with when you fall asleep and when you get up is going to be another big thing here to keep your circadian rhythm in check, which in turn is going to help with your sleep quality. And the third thing is going to be your overall like stress load on your body, like overall, but then also before bed. So making sure that you're managing your stressors overall, you're not letting that get too out of whack, but then also making sure that you're not doing too much right before bed that's like super stimulating, right? You want to try to get in this relaxed state. So whether you do breath work, like meditation, journaling, time with your family, whatever it may be, you just want to do something that's going to get your heart rate down and you're not like super amped up, trying to avoid work, things like that. And then the last thing is going to be avoiding
your box.
Yeah, not
fiery email or
scrolling social media, doom scrolling.
The news.
So you want to be the opposite. You want to get bright light early in the day, but as we get later into the day, you want to try to avoid as much bright light as possible, like blue light blocking glass. I use them. To me, it might be a little bit more placebo, but I think it's mixed in terms of the research around like blue light blocking glasses. For me, I found it to be helpful, but again, that could just be placebo. But you can also dim the light on your phone as well too, to make it more like that orange color, right? They have like night light, stuff like that. And then any overhead lights you probably want to turn off after 6 or 7 p.m. there. So just trying to avoid as much bright light as possible. And that's going to set us up for good quality sleep. And a lot of times when I ask clients about their sleep, it's usually, oh, hey, I slept 8 hours. I'm like, that's good. That's awesome. We definitely want to set ourselves up to get a good amount of sleep, but we also want to make sure that the quality's there and we're setting ourselves up for good sleep. So it's like you get 7 quality hours of sleep, then 8 hours of you just going into bed, like, hey, it's 9 o'clock. Oh, I need to get 8 hours of sleep. I got to get in bed. So then you get in bed, you're super stressed about getting 8 hours of sleep. Now you're tossing and turning. And that kind of becomes like a trained almost habit in a way that now you have this built-in anxiety around sleep. And so that's why I'm a huge fan of making sure we're getting things done throughout the day, getting that nice wind down routine. So that way, when you go to sleep, you're feeling good and you're going to fall asleep a lot quicker there. Alcohol, that's another one that, hey, you want to be super careful with that too close to bed too, because that's going to be something that, yes, it will make you sleepy, but it's not going to get that deep sleep that you need to get as well too. Now, one thing I do want to say on this, Obviously, menopause can be a challenge from a sleep perspective there. Again, I think with this, we're just trying to stack as many habits as we can in our favor, because I think that's going to put you in a better position to get good sleep during this time. But also the other thing we need to look out for too is sleep apnea as well too. That's a big one that you could be doing all these things. And if you do suffer from that, like, man, that's going to wreck your sleep quality. So you could ask your partner if you snore, or if you hear your partner snore, like that's a sign that, hey, you might want to get that checked out, because that's going to be something that you definitely want to. You could be doing all these things and that's just going to really wreck your sleep, and you need to get some sort of medical kind of intervention with that. You could do a sleep study with that as well too, but that would definitely be something to look into more. Ask your partner if you snore, and if you do, I would maybe start to look into that a little bit more, especially if you feel like you're getting 8 hours, you're practicing all these good habits, and you still feel like you're like not getting deep quality sleep.
App too that like will track like the noises that you make at night. I'm not sure what it is.
I think you're right.
I've seen it, but it would be interesting to do that. Or if you wake up, like if you always have a dry mouth, that might be an indication as well. She had a question
around meal timing. Yeah, so she asks, is meal timing mostly around workouts? Yeah, that's going to be important. But to me, meal timing is how many meals are you having per day? What is that breakdown of your meals throughout the day? So to me, that's the concept of meal timing. But it also is like meal timing around your workouts as well too. So it encompasses multiple things. But I was specifically talking about like meal timing around workouts and how that's going to impact like your performance in the gym, but also recovery and your ability to build muscle there. But meal timing, yeah, it can be all those things. I don't know, Robin, did you have any follow-ups to the meal timing one? There was anything specific?
No, I guess I was just wondering if there's certain times you should eat, or did that play into it as well as not only just after workouts? I guess that was my question.
Yeah. Are we talking from like a body composition standpoint, like fat loss, muscle gain, things like that? Is that kind of what you meant by that?
Yeah.
So I'm sure, as Kathy's kind of told you guys, like your overall caloric intake for the day is going to really the deciding factor here with everything. However, I do feel like that can sometimes lead people astray. So if you're seeing good results with that, sleep's good, everything like that, you're seeing good results, doing what's working for you. But if you're finding that you are maybe struggling a little bit, like I would look into meal timing a little bit in terms of, again, how many meals you're having per day, when you're having those meals, and is it around your workout? Because I do think that is often the thing that gets overlooked, and people are like, meal timing doesn't matter. It's all calories in, calories out. And again, that is true to an extent, but I also think that if we're looking on body composition, so as I talked about initially, like when we're looking at, we want to use scale weight, but ultimately we're trying to do things that are going to maximize your body, the muscle that you have, the body fat that you have, that's your body composition. That's what that weight is made up of. And I think that meal timing does often get overlooked. So for me, it's one, yes, around your workouts. So we talked about what we want to do there. We just want to try to get some protein around workouts. But where I do think things can get tricky, and this comes back to the circadian rhythm that I talked about, meal timing around sleep. I do think, so there's a myth that, oh, hey, you eat carbs after 6, it's going to be, you're going to put on a ton of body fat. That's not true. However, I do think that if you are struggling, what we want to do with meal timing around sleep is you just want to avoid like really large meals as close to sleep as possible. You want to try to push that away if you can. And we also want to try to avoid highly processed foods, like low protein meals too close to bed too. So if we're gonna do, because what happens is it can mess with your digestion. If you do suffer from like acid reflux or any sort of digestion issues, like eating too close to bed could make that worse, or it could start to cause some of that. It's also going to impact your sleep as well too if you're eating too close to bed, which we talked about the importance of that. And our blood sugar regulation just is not optimized at that time. And so what that can do is that may not mess with your body weight, but over time it could start to mess with your body composition, right? Our body's just not going to partition the nutrients that we give it as well at that time. Again, though, calories in, calories out is still the most important thing. And so one night you do that, it's not a big deal, right? And I just say we want to make sure that we just want to be educated around what we're doing around sleep. Like I said, if you maybe you're low on protein for that day, you're low on calories for that day, don't be like, you know what, I'm not going to eat anything because Jeff said, hey, meal timing matters. Maybe you have a high protein meal before bed. I think that's going to be fine. We just want to be like, okay, hey, it's 10:30 at night. Probably not the time to have half a pizza, right? Or have just a bunch of like candy or something like that, right? That's what we're talking about here. We just want to make strategic and educated choices around that time. But I do think that is something that often gets overlooked, especially when it comes to body composition. And then I personally like to have clients pick a certain amount of meals that they eat per day and just get some sort of structure. And that just, again, just sets your circadian rhythm. And it also allows you to be like, okay, hey, I eat 4 meals per day. I just ate my second meal. I usually eat my third meal around like 3 to 5 or whatever that is for you. That way too, when it's, let's say it's 2 p.m. and you start to get super hungry, okay, I'm going to eat in an hour. Whereas I feel like if people just track as they go, or they're random with how many meals they have per day, and you start to experience some hunger, you know what? Oh crap, I'm hungry. I'm going to go snack or do whatever. So I feel like it gives you some nice, it anchors your day in a way there. So again, with meal timing, it's timing around your workouts. It's how many meals you have per day, when you have those meals. All these things are important there. Does anybody have any questions or follow-ups to that or anything?
I have a quick question. When
Yeah.
you're working out in the morning, because I typically don't eat anything before a workout, and I'm just doing weight training, but is it still, do I need to get something in before that workout?
What time, Jen?
It's usually 6 or 7 a.m.
What I would say in this situation is your total calorie intake for the day is the most important. So we always want to keep that in mind. So you could do it to where, hey, you've always worked out fast. Maybe you have just something small before you go in potentially, right? That could help with your training performance. However, again, now that means if we're going to eat a little bit more beforehand and you're trying to control your overall caloric intake, right? How many calories you eat in the day, that means you are going to have to take away from something later on in the day, which could be good or it may not be good for you. So you just need to look at that. But in saying that, you could see some potential benefit from like a training performance aspect there if you've never done it. However, I do think that we also have to realize that what we ate the day before, we're still going to have some energy sitting around too. I think the big thing that I would be concerned about would be making sure that in the morning you're hydrated. To me, that's going to be the big thing because as I talked about, if you go in even a little bit dehydrated, that can impact your training performance. So that could be a thing where it's, oh, hey, you know what? I actually don't really focus on my hydration. Again, hydration is also your electrolytes too. So if you're sweating a lot, you're not getting a lot of salt, that could be something that you want to look at there. But I think so from my understanding in the research, when it comes to stuff before you work out, for some people, when they're okay with like kind of feeling a little hungry when they train, some people, they need to they don't like that feeling. So I think for that person, getting a little bit of food beforehand could be helpful. But it's just, if you can feel somewhat satiated, that could help. So I think, long story short, I think if you have never tried it, it could be something worth exploring for you that you may find it helps with your training. But if you're rushed in the morning, now you're like trying to shovel down food, that's not going to be great from a digestion standpoint. And then it also could impact your training, right? So it's just one of those things that it's just very depends on the person, and you have to try it out and just see what works for you there. But that's where, again, like now, okay, you decide, hey, I want to do it. Now we can be smart with the choices that we're making beforehand, right? So you know what, I do want to try it. Maybe you do a protein shake with either like a banana or like a watermelon or something, right? Something that's not like super heavy, that's just going to sit in your stomach, right? So that would be something that you could potentially work around with that. But again, now you're adding food in before you work out, so you're going to have to take it out elsewhere throughout the day. So you just have to account for that.
Sorry, my spelling's horrible. I didn't mean to put that in there. Lisa's saying I struggle with, if I start eating early, I tend to want to eat more throughout the day. So I often push my first meal until about 10 a.m. I used to be this way as well because I would be hungry later in the day. And I think that's the model, right? That's where we have a light breakfast, like a somewhat of a lunch, and then a heavier meal at night, right? That's like the family dynamic. That's when you're feeding your kids. And so the way I like to look at it is spreading that food throughout as energy. And this isn't going to be for everybody, like what works for you. But I found that when I have most of my calories earlier on in the day, I am not as hungry at night because you have that balance. But that just takes a while to shift that if that's the model that you're in. That's ingrained. There's so much there to unpack. Your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I think it is a little bit habitual, right? Where it's like, hey, if you always do that, like that, you are just accustomed to that, right? It's, oh, hey, it's nighttime. I do want to eat a bit more. This is what I'm used to. Also, I would be curious to see like what your day looks like early, right? I'm assuming you're getting a good amount of protein, but I would definitely look at that, like making sure that you're getting a good solid protein meal early in the day. But what I wanted to say on this, and this was something that I found super interesting, and I actually made a post on this, but so humans actually, so the time of day of food intake influences overall intake. So again, the less filling the food is early in the day, the more hungry you're going to be. But naturally, though, humans, we just tend to be hungrier at night, right? There is a kind of just a biological aspect to this where we just are hungrier at night. So you're fighting against that as well too. And then you add on like it's a habitual thing. And then you add on, hey, what you do early in the day is also going to impact it. So there's a lot of things at play here that could, impact that. I'm just trying to see if there was anything else from that study that I want to show up.
I'm dropping your Insta link.
Yep. So in the study, they found that satiety was lower later in the day, right? So we're not as full later in the day. People consumed more calories as the day progressed, and meal frequency increased as the day went on. So this is just all going to equal, right? Like a higher likelihood of eating more calories overall. So it's like, this again comes back to the concept of meal timing, where I do think it is often underlooked and I do think it is important. But also understand that, hey, if you are hungrier at night, it is like just as humans, that's just what happens. So I think if you're aware of that, that can also help you set up your day too, where it's like, hey, this isn't me, there's nothing wrong with me, this is just a natural human instinct to want to eat more food later on in the day.
Yeah, I thought these worked out at night. Let's talk about creatine.
Yeah.
I know you said that there was a new study. You said you were increasing your creatine based on the new research that you had seen.
Yeah, so there's not one study. This has been like a slow kind of burn for a while, right? So everybody knows creatine as, oh, a muscle building supplement. And definitely is that, right? There's a ton of research on that. It helps with body composition, it helps with strength. And we definitely want to take it for that reason. But because they've done so much research on creatine, they started to find that there was some cognitive effects, brain health effects, therefore mental health effects potentially as well too from taking creatine. And so again, just so everyone knows, you can find creatine in your muscle, but also in your brain as well too, right? And so that's, I think they figured that out. If we can increase the amount of creatine in our muscle, that therefore would make more sense that, or it would make sense that we could do the same thing in the brain as well too. And so there's been a few studies. So one study, like in terms of depression, right? So we're talking the mental health side of things. Creatine enhances outcomes when paired with standard treatment. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as SSRIs. They also saw independent improvements were seen even without traditional meds in at least one study. And it was a small sample. It was actually in meth users, believe it or not. That's super interesting. But it does appear to speed up recovery timelines for depression, especially promising for treatment-resistant depression. So it can help with mental health and then also cognitive health as well too, in terms of just how you think, remembering, memory, stuff like that. But really where it seems to work best is under high stress or energy demanding situations. So like sleep deprivation. So again, if you have a couple poor nights of sleep or you're going through a time where you're going to have poor sleep for a little while, creatine can help from a cognitive aspect there. Cognitive overload. So if you're just under a lot of stress, you have a lot going on at work, at home, everything that you're doing. And again, like we saw here with depression. Now, the thing with this is it seems that you need a little bit more for the cognitive and mental health benefits. So that's why I decided to increase it up to 10 to potentially get some of those benefits there, because it does take time to build up in your brain. And it's going to take a little bit longer for it to build up there. You're probably looking at about 10 grams a day, but it is also going to be somewhat based off of body weight. I was actually surprised to find out. I thought they used like doses based off of body weight, but it seems like most studies are just standard, hey, 5 grams, 10 grams, 20 grams there. And so I think if you want to look for those more cognitive benefits, you're probably looking at closer to 7.5 to 10 grams per day or even higher. Now, a few things with that. So again, 5 grams is going to be good. You're gonna get good solid benefits from that. You may still get a little bit of cognitive effects from that, but when we start to go up a little bit, that's where you're gonna start to notice those a little bit more. So again, if you're a small person, probably closer to 5 to 10 is going to be solid for you. If you're a larger person, probably closer to 10 to 15 grams potentially there. Now, a few things. Creatine is found in like meat and food. So you can get a little bit there, but it's never going to be enough as you would get from like supplementation. If you do eat more plant-based, you're obviously going to be at a higher need. I think the older you get, the higher the need for creatine. There was also another study recently that did come out that in older adults, I think they were men, all men, they're aged between 50 and 65. They found that it potentially helped with vascular health as well too, something to potentially look at there. But again, the older you get, if you don't eat a lot of meat, your needs for creatine are going to be higher. Now, there's some people that respond just like with muscle building, right? Some people respond really well, are like hyper responders to building muscle. Some people are not. Same thing with creatine. Some people are going to hyper respond to it. Some people not as much. But it's not super expensive and it's a low risk, high reward potentially a high reward supplement to where it just makes it a no-brainer to take. The other thing I want to go over is the dosing of it. So with 10 grams, you could experience a little bit of bloating and some little bit of GI distress. So if you decide, hey, I'm going to bump it up to say 7.5 or 10, maybe you split it up throughout the day, and that could potentially help with that. And again, we want to go with monohydrate. Creatine monohydrate is the one that's most studied, and it's going to be the cheapest form. So if someone tries to say, hey, take HCl or something like that, just understand that one's going to be a little bit more expensive and will probably work, but it's just going to be a little bit more expensive than the monohydrate version would be there. I'm trying to think. Timing's a very popular kind of question around creatine, and really any time throughout the day is going to be fine with creatine. Just make sure you take it regularly. That's a big thing. You want to take it regularly. It's going to take a little bit of time to get into your muscle. It's going to take a little bit of time to get to your brain, but we need to take it consistently day in and day out. And you don't have to cycle it. You can take it as long as you want, right? Like they've looked at people taking it for extended periods of time. There's been no health issues. A lot of people say, can it mess with your kidneys? And in people with healthy kidneys already, it's not going to make that worse. That is obviously something that you need to look at. If you do have any kidney issues, like you would definitely want to check with your doctor on this there. So that's my creatine 101. But again, I think the big thing is where I see things going in the research, there's going to continue to be more and more research around creatine and mental health and brain health and cognitive function. So keep a lookout for that. But I also feel like, from my understanding, they're going to continue to explore it in other aspects of like overall health as well too. So I just think, to me, I feel like it's going to eventually be a supplement that like most people just should be on, which is weird because it was initially this muscle building supplement that people were like, oh crap.
Oh God, if I take that, I'm going to get huge.
Yeah, I know. So it's just funny to see that.
Also, guys, like with creatine, like, it's not anything that's going to be marketed towards women in menopause, or this is going to help with your bloating and anything with a pink label on it. That's not what you're looking for. Creatine gummies, just take it in a powdered form. It's very inexpensive. There's no such thing as a creatine built for women. You want to make sure that when you get subs like this, that it's just creatine. That's all we need. That's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah, the gummies are just essentially like, it's more a convenience thing there more than anything, but it's going to be more expensive to do the gummies.
And it doesn't taste, there is zero flavor to creatine.
Yeah, hydrate is the kind you want to get.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a cheap one on. So I know you get like tubs of it, so.
Jen asked 10 grams a day. I would mess around with it, start maybe with 5 for a little bit, get used to it, see what happens, and then bump up to 10. Here's the thing too, like this needs to be said, and Kathy, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, but like when you do start taking creatine, you could potentially increase water weight, okay? But it's not a bad thing. It's just going to be water weight. So if you hop on the scale after taking creatine for a week or two and you see it's up, it's not going to be fat gain. What's going to happen is it's going to draw water into your muscle. And so your muscles are going to just look a little bit fuller, which is a good thing. So just be aware of that, because people start taking it and then think, oh crap, I'm gaining all this weight. It's from the creatine, but it's just water weight, and it's not going to, if anything, it's going to improve your body composition with where you're currently at. And so that's why I say, hey, start with 5 and then see how you respond to it, how you feel. And then maybe after a month or 2, you could potentially bump it up. And they also will sometimes say, hey, start with loading phase where you do like super high amounts for a week or 2, like 20 to 25 grams. Again, you don't need to do that. It's just, again, you could see like some of those cognitive benefits, but to me, that's just overkill. And you're really going to find that you're probably going to gain a little water weight. And just, again, from a GI standpoint, you may feel super bloated and things like that. I personally have, from going from 5 to 10, I have noticed a little bit of bloating after I take it. And this may be TMI, but just a little bit more gas than normal too by taking it. So that is something that I have noticed doing 10. So I need to probably do 5 and 5, but I'll forget to do that. So I just do 10. And it seems like it's getting better. It's not as bad as it was initially. So there's probably a little bit of your body gets used to it.
Little adjustment phase. Also, something with creatine, like this isn't something like you'd be okay if you went on vacation and didn't bring your creatine with you. It'll be okay. So it's not something that you have to be.
Well,
like you want to be regular with it, but you don't have to be obsessive with it.
If you're flying and you take it and you put it in a little baggie, it is a white powdery substance, so it may get looked at. But
they're always flag bags.
Yeah,
Powders.
But they'll know that it's not cocaine. But just a warning, they may be like, hey, what is in here? Creatine, I swear. I'm getting it for the mental health benefits.
Yeah, bro. Wow, it's been an hour. It doesn't even seem like it has been. Any thoughts to wrap this up, Jeff? I so appreciate you for coming on.
Yeah, I think to sum up the body comp stuff, again, I think the big thing being, one, you can build muscle in a deficit, but your inputs are going to be the most important thing. That's what I always try to preach to my clients, are the things that we're doing. Yes, we obviously want to control for caloric intake and see where things are trending in terms of your body weight, because again, that's going to be the thing that dictates this is what your body's going to prefer to do, right? So when you're seeing your weight trend down, it's going to prefer to obviously take stored energy off your body. But what we're doing in that process is going to tell it where to take that from. And we can still build muscle in a deficit. You're not going to lose body fat at maintenance, but there's still a ton of positive things that can happen at maintenance that are going to set you up now and in the future there. And then I think my meal timing, I know that's other big thing we talked about. Meal timing I think it's underrated, and I think it's important. And again, if you're feeling like you're stuck, I would definitely look into those things a bit more, and definitely try creatine.
Love it. Perfect. All right, guys. So I dropped Jeff's link in here for Instagram. You're on Facebook too, though, right?
Yeah, I'm not as active on Facebook, but I will post some stuff on there. But I am on Facebook.
Okay. And so it's Jeff, Hoehn. You can find him on Facebook there. And then I'm sure he'd be willing to answer whatever questions that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys do have any more questions on this, I'd love to answer them. So just shoot me a message on Instagram there. Yep. Thanks for having me.